Hey, this is Dave DeCamp from antiwar.com. This is anti-war news for Thursday, August 24th, 2023. All right, the first story at the top of antiwar.com today: Prigozhin believed to be dead after a plane crash. So Wagner chief Yevgeny Prigozhin is believed to be dead following the crash of a private jet in Russia's Tver Oblast. So Russian authorities told the media that Prigozhin was listed as a passenger of the plane and that all 10 people who were on board were killed in the crash. Russia's emergency ministry told TASS that the plane was flying from Moscow headed to St. Petersburg. Russia's Federal Air Transport Agency said, quote, "An investigation of the Embraer plane crash that happened in the Tver region this evening was initiated. According to the passenger list, first and last name of Yevgeny Prigozhin was included in this list," end quote. So there's a video circulating on social media that appears to show a plane falling from the sky. Well, it does show a plane falling from the sky, and they're saying that this is the video of this plane. And, you know, it's not just on Twitter and Telegram. It's also been posted on Russian media websites and stuff. So it's possible that this is it. And, you know, you could see this plane just drop. And there's another video that apparently they say shows the aftermath. And looking at it, you know, it doesn't look like anybody could have survived this crash. It's a pretty devastating scene. So, you know, definitely doesn't seem like there's any survivors. And as of, you know, early Monday morning in Moscow, late Wednesday night here on the East Coast of the United States, it's not officially confirmed that Prigozhin was dead, but it seems very likely at this point. And by the time you listen to this, you know, if you're listening Thursday morning, you know, there might be a big update, but this is what we know now as I'm recording this. And there are all sorts of rumors and speculation flying around. A Wagner-linked Telegram channel claimed that Russian air defenses downed the plane, but nothing is confirmed, and other Russian Telegram channels are speculating that a bomb may have been planted on board. So Russia's Federal Air Transport Agency published the list of all the passengers who were on the plane, and the list included Dmitry Utkin, who's a Wagner commander who is said to be, alleged to be, the co-founder of the mercenary group. So the incident occurred just 2 days after a video of Prigozhin was posted on Telegram where he appeared to be in Africa, and in that video he vowed to make Africa more free and Russia an even greater on every continent. So before that video, which was posted on Monday, Prigozhin stayed relatively out of the public eye. He was being relatively low-key after his short-lived mutiny against Russia's military establishment that was put down back in June. So the downing of the plane came after reports surfaced that General Sergei Surovikin, who was suspected of having foreknowledge of Prigozhin's uprising, he was removed from his position as the head of Russian aerospace forces. And Surovikin was in charge of the Russian military operation in Ukraine for a short time. I believe he was appointed in November and then replaced in January. And he was kind of overseeing the buildup and the new mass bombings of Ukrainian infrastructure that started in that period. And Prigozhin always had nice things to say about him when he was putting out his videos, you know, railing against Shoigu, the Russian defense minister, and the other top Russian military leaders. That, you know, he was saying Surovikin should be, you know, back in charge. So when asked by reporters about the news, President Biden said that he did not know what happened, but that he was not surprised. And I think a lot of people weren't surprised when they saw the news that it looks like Prigozhin is dead. And again, lots of speculation. I won't get into it too much. I'm curious to know what you guys think. If you want to let me know in the comments and stuff or email. But, my initial reaction was, obviously this was Putin. But at the same time, shooting a plane out of the sky or planting a bomb on a plane, making it kind of a big ordeal like this, it doesn't really seem like Putin's style to me. There's all sorts of, possibilities. I think it might be possible that other elements, in Russia's military that are really unhappy, there could be people not happy with the fact that Prigozhin did what he did. The Wagner fighters killed Russian airmen during the mutiny. I'm not sure how many. So I think, maybe there's some angry people in the military who wanted to take him out. There's a chance, who knows, maybe Ukraine did it or the CIA. Again, all sorts of possibilities. But again, let me know what you think, and we'll see how this plays out. It seems very, very likely that he's dead. I would be surprised if it turns out he's not. But we will see how this all develops. All right, the next story here, Ukraine consistently attacks Moscow amid stalled counteroffensive. So this is one from Kyle Anzalone over at the Libertarian Institute. The Kremlin reported that Ukrainian drones were downed in the Moscow region for a sixth consecutive day. Kiev has launched a series of attacks on Russia as it has failed to retake territory during its spring counteroffensive. So Russian officials said that they downed 3 Ukrainian drones targeting Moscow on Wednesday. TASS reported that no one in the Moscow region was killed or injured, and a building was damaged after being downed by Russian electronic warfare systems. And the drones have caused Moscow to shut down air traffic at its airports for 3 straight days now. So 6 days in a row. So I said yesterday, it seems like this is a daily occurrence, and it has been for 6 days. So additionally, Ukraine attacked the Belgorod region, which borders Ukraine, and Belgorod's governor said that 3 people were killed in this attack, 3 civilians. This is just an example of these Ukrainian drone attacks inside Russia. They really ramped up, kind of recently, and now it's just every day we're seeing this in some region of Russia. There are drone attacks. All right, the next one here, the White House says that Congress will back more Ukraine spending. So National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan said Tuesday that the U.S. has expressed to Ukraine and European allies that Congress will back the new spending on the war in Ukraine that President Biden has requested, despite dissonant voices among Republicans. So an ambassador from a European country confirmed to Axios that his government had received this message from the U.S. in recent days. Sullivan noted in his comments that there are still strong voices in leadership positions in the Republican Party in Congress who favor continuing to fund the proxy war against Russia. And I think he's right, unfortunately. But what's interesting here is that a House GOP leadership aide told Axios that the new Ukraine spending would likely pass if brought to a vote, which I think that's, certain. I think, every Democrat would probably vote for it, and enough Republicans would vote for it. But this aide is saying that House Speaker Kevin McCarthy might have difficulty bringing it to the floor for a vote due to growing opposition. And I'm not sure, I got to ask people that are more familiar with this exactly how the legislative procedures work, but I know that there are powers that Republicans have that they could block things from being brought to the floor. I don't know if they could block it outright, or I know they could definitely delay things for a while and make it difficult. So, we might see that, and I think that's good at least. So this aide said, quote, "I just don't see that support in the House Republican conference now. We are well beyond just the Freedom Caucus talking about this," end quote. And the Freedom Caucus is a few dozen Republicans, and most of them have opposed the war, funding the war this whole time. And last week, as I covered, Andy Harris, who's a Republican from Maryland in the House, he's in the Freedom Caucus, but he's also the co-chair of the Congressional Ukraine Caucus, and he'd been a staunch supporter of this war until recently. He said last week that he would not support new spending on the war. He said the counteroffensive failed. He said that the U.S. should push Zelensky into peace talks. So, that's a sign that there is growing opposition, and it's not just going to be that core group of Republicans that voted against the initial Ukraine aid. It seems like it is going to be more, and it's going to make life a little harder for McCarthy and Biden to get this new Ukraine aid passed. And then just for the numbers, so Biden requested an additional $24 billion. So if that is authorized, it will bring total spending on the war to $137 billion. And this comes after a CNN poll said 55% of Americans are against any new spending on the war in Ukraine. So the opposition is growing, which I think is good. All right, so the next one here, Sullivan tries to put a positive spin on failing Ukraine counteroffensive. So this is another one from Kyle at the Libertarian Institute. So White House National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan claims that the war in Ukraine has not reached a stalemate and that Kiev's forces were methodically capturing territory. The statement comes as other American officials say the Ukrainian counteroffensive is struggling and that Kiev should have negotiated with Moscow last year. So at a press conference on Tuesday, Sullivan told reporters, quote, "There is attacking and defending taking place on both sides at multiple points along a very extended front line of trace," end quote. He said that Ukraine is taking territory on a methodic, systematic basis, and that he does not assess the conflict as a stalemate. So you have Sullivan. This is what the Biden administration is saying publicly. And Kyle goes on to mention the countless examples, and there is a distinction here. You have Sullivan saying this publicly and these comments from other American officials, besides some members of Congress. When we're talking about Biden administration officials, they're saying this to the media anonymously, which is a difference. But I think there's enough of these reports. I mean, there's been a ton of them. I haven't even been covering all of them because there's been so many. It's not just some dissident views within the administration. It seems to be most officials speaking to the media are saying, the counteroffensive has failed, and they're trying to figure out ways to, pin the blame elsewhere, blaming Ukraine's tactics, saying Ukraine's worried about, that too many people are being killed. So I think this just goes to show that the Biden administration and Sullivan, the White House, are just publicly lying about this. I think that's very clear. The same way Blinken was after the Discord leaks came out, and he said, those are old assessments. We think we think Ukraine can regain territory in this coming counteroffensive. And then there was other reports at the time saying that wasn't true, that the U.S. did not think that. And I think it's very clear that they've just been lying about this war all along. As the U.S. government does lie about war. All right, so I want to take this moment again to mention that it is our fundraiser at antiwar.com, and we have a nice message from Ron Paul at the top of the page. He reads antiwar.com every day. Many of you read antiwar.com every day, or if you listen to this podcast, you listen to antiwar.com every day. So please go to antiwar.com/donate and help us with this fundraiser so we could focus on bringing you this coverage that we do every day. You can see the different ways that you can support us. We are entirely reader funded. This is how we do it. This is how I provide you with this show. So again, antiwar.com/donate to help us out. And while I'm discussing Ron Paul, I also want to mention that if you are in the DC area, or if you feel like traveling, because this is an event worth traveling for, the Ron Paul Institute is putting on one of their conferences in DC on Saturday, September 2nd. So this is coming up, and this is at the Hilton Washington Dulles Airport. And these events are great. I actually went to the one last year in DC, and I had a great time. I hung out with some friends, met some people that I've known online for so long, and it was really great meeting them in person. Hung out at the hotel bar the night before, and then the event was great. And for those who aren't familiar, the Ron Paul Institute, Daniel McAdams, who runs it, and Ron Paul, of course, they focus on foreign policy. So if you like this show, if you're interested in this show, you would love their conferences. And you don't have to be a libertarian or a right-winger to go. They have people from all over the political spectrum. That's what they're all about. So Dan McAdams opens it up, and Gary Heaven gives a speech as well. And you also have Max Blumenthal and Anya Parampil from the Gray Zone, Jeff Deist, Professor Jonathan Turley, Professor Michael Vlahos, and Colonel Douglas McGregor. I mean, who doesn't want to see him speak? I saw he spoke last year at this conference too. It was great. And then, of course, Ron Paul. So I think, the listeners of this show would really enjoy this. And it is coming up soon, September 2nd. So get tickets. They're $75 to $85, and you can find it at the Ron Paul Institute website. We have an ad on our page, or you can just Google it, Ron Paul Institute DC conference. So definitely check that out if you can. Next year, I'm going to go. I'm not going this year because we have a baby coming around that time. So fortunately, I can't make it, but you'll definitely enjoy it if you like this show. All right, back to the news here. So the next one, the U.S. approves a $500 million arms sale for Taiwan. So the State Department on Wednesday approved a potential $500 million arms sale to Taiwan for infrared search and track systems for the island's F-16 fighter jets. So the Pentagon's Defense Security Cooperation Agency said the sale is to the Taipei Economic and Cultural Representative Office. That's Taiwan's de facto embassy in the U.S., as the U.S. and Taiwan do not have formal relations. The principal contractor for the deal is Lockheed Martin. So the State Department, the approval of the potential deal begins a period where Congress could block the potential deal, but there is widespread, it's not going to be blocked because in Congress, there's widespread support for arming Taiwan and virtually no opposition. So the approval came almost a month after the Biden administration provided Taiwan with $345 million in military aid using the Presidential Drawdown Authority, which allows the U.S. to send weapons straight from Pentagon stockpiles. And this is the primary way that the U.S. has been arming Ukraine. And that type of aid was unprecedented. As I've covered, the U.S. has always sold weapons to Taiwan, but they have not financed the purchases or provided them free of charge like they do with this Presidential Drawdown Authority. And this deal, China is very unhappy about that new support, and China opposes U.S. arms sales to Taiwan in general. So this is going to draw a rebuke from Beijing, of course. China says that the U.S. committed to eventually ending arms sales to Taiwan. And if you look at the third joint communique, that was the part of the three joint communiques that the U.S. and China issued when they normalized relations. This one was in 1982 concerning Taiwan arms sales. And it says that the U.S. government intended to gradually reduce arms sales to Taiwan, leading over a period of time to a final resolution. A little ambiguous, but it sounds like that is what they agreed to. But at the same time, U.S. officials have made clear, and even on the day that the communique was issued, President Reagan, in an internal memo, basically made clear that the U.S. was going to leave this open to its own interpretation. And they said that as long as China is committed to resolving the issue with Taiwan peacefully, that's what it hinges on. And of course, now China has increased its military activity around Taiwan. But as I'm always going on about, that is mainly in response to all this new U.S. support, both diplomatically and militarily, because China views that as a violation of their normalization agreement with the U.S. All right, so the next one here, China says that it allowed the Philippines to resupply a grounded ship. So the Chinese Coast Guard said on Tuesday it allowed Philippine vessels to resupply a grounded Philippine warship on 2nd Thomas Shoal, which is a reef in the disputed Spratly Islands of the South China Sea. So a spokesman for the Chinese Coast Guard said that a temporary special arrangement was allowed because the Philippine vessels were not carrying illegal construction materials. He said that before allowing the Philippine vessels to resupply the BRP Sierra, that the Chinese Coast Guard issued a stern warning. So the Philippines grounded this ship, and that's the name of it, the BRP Sierra Madre. They grounded it on 2nd Thomas Shoal in 1999 to assert its claims, and they use a vessel as a base of operations. China had been blocking the resupply missions. There was an incident 3 weeks ago where China fired a water cannon. Manila rejected China's framing of the incident that occurred near the disputed shoal on Tuesday. They said that they managed to supply the ship despite harassment from Chinese vessels, and Philippine officials also said that they don't need Chinese permission to access the reef. So one thing the Philippines has been doing is that they've been bringing journalists along when they try to resupply this reef. And there was a team of AFP journalists who were embedded on one of the Philippine Coast Guard vessels. And they said that initially these Chinese vessels tried to block the Philippine boats, and there was a standoff. And then eventually a Chinese radio operator said that they were going to permit them to supply the ship in the spirit of humanism, is how they put it. And the reason why this is so important is because the United States has said explicitly that if Chinese Coast Guard or other vessels in the South China Sea are fired on, it would invoke the U.S.-Philippine Mutual Defense Treaty, which means the U.S. would go to war with China over, an incident if this thing turns hot, if these boats ever start firing at each other. And this isn't just something the U.S. is saying. They actually formalized this commitment by adding new guidelines to the U.S.-Philippine Mutual Defense Treaty. That happened a couple months ago, around the time the U.S. and the Philippines signed the deal for the U.S. to get more military bases in the Philippines. So, this is a very dangerous area, and it's something I think overlooked by a lot of people. All right, the next one here, BRICS is set to open doors to new members. So this is another one from Kyle at the Libertarian Institute. So the BRICS summit is this week, and BRICS nations announced their intention to expand their group during a summit in South Africa. China seeks to grow BRICS to be a peer with the Group of Seven, the G7. So speaking at the summit in South Africa on Wednesday, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi signaled that BRICS was prepared to add new members. And this is a big deal because BRICS, which is Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, India is kind of different than, what they have different ideas than what China does. And there were rumors and reports saying that India did not want to expand BRICS, because India is also trying to, expand ties with the U.S. They're kind of playing both sides. But now they're saying that they agreed to expand it, and all the other leaders agreed with that. So this is significant. And Brazil says that they want to bring Argentina in. That's a country that they're eyeing to bring into this. And they also say that they're going to increase trade with each other's, with their own currencies. So they're eyeing de-dollarization, which of course is a threat to, the U.S. grip on the global financial and economic system, and just a threat to U.S., global dominance in general. So this is, of course, all accelerating, in the wake of the invasion, Russia's invasion of Ukraine, and the Western sanctions, the U.S. and Western sanctions that have followed, and just sanctions in general. In recent years, the U.S. has just been sanctioned crazy, and all these countries that are being targeted with sanctions naturally will increase cooperation. And again, India is a very interesting case, because if you remember at the beginning of the war, they weren't going along with the sanctions. They're buying a ton of Russian oil now, and there were some threats. U.S. officials were threatening sanctions on India, but they realized, India is too important in their strategy against China, so they backed down. So they're kind of letting India do what they want. India buys a lot of Russian weapons, because they want them as an ally against China. And then you have China and India are both in BRICS. So again, it's just kind of an interesting dynamic. All right, so the last story here in the news section, Trump plans massive tariffs if reelected. So this is another one from the Libertarian Institute. This is by Connor Freeman. These guys helped out a lot today. So President Donald Trump he privately met with his top economic advisors last week and discussed plans for major tariff increases. 3 people familiar with the matter told the Washington Post. So one of the ideas which was floated involves a universal baseline tariff on nearly all imports to the U.S., which may be as high as 10%. So that's pretty big. The current baseline is around 3%. China's tariffs, the ones that Trump imposed that Biden has kept on, most of them face an average duty of around 19%. So in general, he wants to increase tariffs across the board. And, a lot of this is about China when I cover kind of the trade war stuff and economic stuff like this, because, everybody accuses Biden of being soft on China, but he's kept Trump's tariffs and he's really ramped up the trade war by hitting China with these sanctions, targeting their semiconductor industry, recently signing an executive order to limit U.S. investment in certain tech industries in China. So it sounds like Trump, wants to ramp that up even more, again, with kind of more protectionism and just tariffs across the board. So another thing, so Wednesday night was the Republican debate, which I haven't watched yet. I have to watch it to see what the foreign policy things they discuss are. But I did watch the interview that Tucker Carlson did with Trump, and there really wasn't much foreign policy there. It was more of a conversation and not really like a question about his presidential policies. But I definitely want to check out the debate with the other candidates, even though it'll probably be tough to sit through just to see the foreign policy stuff. That's it for the news for today. Go check out our Viewpoints. We have one from Dan McKnight of Defend the Guard over at the Libertarian Institute. To Washington, Maui, and Kiev are both just provinces in the empire. One from Ted Snyder. Was Putin really serious about the Minsk Accords? One from Connor O'Keefe at the Mises Institute. The killing and destruction must stop. It is time to end the Ukraine war. One from Branko Marchteach over at Jacobin. Imran Khan's ouster is a story of U.S. power and propaganda. And our spotlight is from W. James Antle at, where is that? At Responsible Statecraft. Neoconservative. Oh, so it's about the debate. And he says, expect the GOP debate to showcase party war over Ukraine. But yeah, that's everything for me for today. Again, please help us out with our fundraiser, antiwar.com/donate. If you can't do that, you could like and subscribe on YouTube, share the show around, comment, follow us on Twitter. All that stuff really helps out. I'll be back tomorrow with some more news. Thanks for listening.